something else happens that you didn't think about when it goes in place. It's the same thing that's happening with the bills. So something makes logical sense, you know, at multiple levels across the country and with our legislatures, but when you get to the scale of where we are in New England, it doesn't work. And so the whole issue of us not having counties and the scale of our development and our size impacts us when we're in a national bill. So I just want to publicly say that our New Hampshire congressional delegation has stood by us and done an excellent job, and I'm very appreciative of it. They understand our needs, and they went and they worked diligently to change that legislation, and that's very, very hard to do. So that's my thanks and appreciation.
Okay.
I would just reiterate what Cynthia said regarding transit. Senator Shaheen put an amendment in a couple weeks ago on the Senate bill and worked very hard with the EPW committee that was working on this and the banking committee. And her amendment eventually got incorporated into the manager's amendments, which were incorporated by unanimous consent. And what that language did that Senator Shaheen put in was protect us in the case of our region going over 200,000 in population, or Nashua going over 200,000 in population, or Manchester, protect us against losing access to any and all of our federal operating funds. So this was critical to us, something we've been talking about for years. Senator Shaheen did a fantastic job on our behalf, and her staff. I spent a lot of time with her staff explaining the intricacies of this for public transit, as well as Manchester and Nashua officials. Congressman Ginta has also been working on our behalf in the House side. They were not as successful, as the House bill has completely fallen apart at this point, and it looks like they won't bring it up again until April based on the latest news. So we're looking at another extension because policy runs out March 31st. But I do have a meeting with Congressman Ginta and his staff next week to talk about what's going on in the House, and hopefully continuing to work on our behalf with reauthorization on the House side. So, but Cynthia is correct. Our congressional delegation has done a fantastic job, and working with us and supporting us. So it's been very nice to see.
Okay.
If there are no questions on it, I'll just show folks quickly the ITS cameras. You probably got to look at them before. It's the wrong one. So this is the coil in the road then? Must be showing cars.
Yes. Yep. That is a loop counter that's built into the roadway. You probably see it like little metal strips built in.
May I just interject for a second? I have to be in Rollinsford within 30 minutes, and so I must proceed immediately, or my wife will scalp me. And so Ken has agreed to assume the responsibility of guiding the meeting the rest of the day. Thank you, Ken.
Maybe you could make a motion so we could do it officially?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Then moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had to run off.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah. So once again, this is basically what you get with the cameras. It's a live feed. State's not storing these security cameras. They're storing information for 14 days and then deleting them.
Okay.
That's.
What's the address for that?
If you go to New Hampshire DOT, 511, you can go to the smart work zones. It'll bring you to this Google map with the different camera locations around the state. And there may be a few other options. I haven't explored the 511 site. I think they just got things going again. I still don't think the phone service is working, where you can call in and ask about delays on the roadway. They give you live updates, but
Great, you can be stalked via the internet.
yeah.
Lovely.
So that's that. Just giving folks a look at that. There's a bunch of them on 93 now.
What do they actually do, these cameras? What's the general purpose for it? Just
We've
to
been
see how
told-
heavy the traffic is?
I think we've been told it's primarily for emergency management situations.
Every night on Channel 9, WR,
Yep.
they always give a traffic update on all the major arteries throughout the
Yep.
city. Spalding Turnpike, now 95, 93.
Mhm.
Are they utilizing this
Yeah,
information too? Is that where they're getting
they
the
have
information
fixed
from?
cameras on 95, and they show a picture of that every night. If there's
Yep.
a big line of cars because there's an accident or something, they'll just use the system and take a look at it. But it's primarily for safety officials to respond to emergency incidents. Is what I understand.
But the average citizen can,
Go on and look at it live. There are a few security cameras primarily on critical infrastructure like bridges. I know the Little Bay bridges are planning to have 4 cameras, and they will keep the information for 14 days, and then it's deleted and written over. But that's a
Not
different type of
publicly
camera. It's
accessible.
not, you can't look at it publicly. So
there is a lot of potential for, I'm just,
absolutely.
with
but-
the amount of domestic violence and whatnot we have in our society, there is the potential for people to go on there and watch people when watching them when they're coming home from work or when they passed a certain, I think there's some downsides to this. Really do.
Certainly a discussion to be hashed out, because I think there's both sides. There's the good and the bad, and we need to find the right balance. Make sure everybody's getting the most out of things.
Okay, any other questions or issues with discussion items number 5.1, 2, or 3? Okay, seeing none, if we can move on to item number 6. I'll just mention that both Councilor Keynes and I have a meeting around 10:30 or so in Rochester that we'd like to be to, so we'd like to move it along as quickly as possible. However, we want to make sure everybody has a chance to participate, so if it.
All right, I'll try to keep this pretty quick. Once again, we're working on a park and ride study, working with Central New Hampshire and Southwest New Hampshire. Basically create a toolkit of guidance for communities that are interested in establishing a park and ride in their community, talking about how to locate it, how to manage it, how to fund it, how to deal with maintenance, how to deal with liability issues and agreements that you might need. And so I set up meetings coming up at the end of the month with C&J Transportation. I'll be talking with Jim Jalbert down in Portsmouth, and then I've also contacted Chris Parker from Dover to talk about the municipal side of the agreements, what works, what doesn't. So really trying to get cracking on this. It's kind of been on the back burner for a little while. It's been pretty busy, but it should be a fun project and interesting stuff. So.
Now, I missed what you were talking, which park and ride you're talking about?
Oh, just general park and rides. It's basically a park and ride development guide for communities or private businesses or churches that would be looking into establishing a park and ride. There's no guidance in New Hampshire for how to go about setting up a park and ride, and it's a big challenge.
It's a good idea, because the one in Dover, I was a little concerned when we had the last snowstorm, because there are people who leave their vehicles there for periods of time. They're parked all over the grass, and then we had a snowstorm.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was like, how are they,
Mhm.
going to get out of there if they came back in the middle of it? But
Yep. So, we're trying to, give some guidance or set up some kind of structure for establishing park and rides beyond just a mitigation action for a bigger project. And we're also looking to do a case study, or 3 different case studies to just kind of use the toolkit to plan for a park and ride. There's no actual guarantee of funding for the park and ride, but it's a good exercise, and it will basically get the project, shovel ready for the next time there's a congestion mitigation, air quality round, or some other type of funding grant round that can be used for park and rides or that purpose. Moving on, we had an interagency consultation meeting with New Hampshire DOT, Federal Highways, DES, and EPA last week, and we were given the draft version of Amendment 5 for the Transportation Improvement Program. This should be the last amendment to this iteration of the Transportation Improvement Program. We'll be starting updating it for a hopeful approval in the end of September. In Amendment 5, in the draft Amendment 5, there was only one project from our region. It was the Somersworth-Berwick Bridge, and it looked like the funding was increased almost double for that project, which is why it's included in this draft. But we are awaiting a final version of the amendment so that we can get rolling on it and get public notice out and share more information with the policy committee here. If there are any projects that communities or agencies need added into this, or they know are upcoming, now is a good time to tell us, or shortly would be a good time to tell us, because this will be the last chance probably for this transportation improvement program to do a full amendment. So any big project changes we need to know about, probably by next Wednesday latest. So.
Do you know what the status is on the legislative level in terms of the current TIP that's before the legislature?
I think there have been a few changes made. Are you talking about 10-year plan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The legislature made a few changes, I believe, to make it somewhat more financially constrained. There were a few changes to the 93 projects that were being programmed. I think they were trying to incorporate, either a few of them either higher on the deferred project list or actually get them back into the plan and fund them through bonds. Glenn, you may know more about that than I do.
I know there's discussions going on, I don't know all the details, but
Yeah.
I think 93 and this Sarah Long are becoming issues.
Yeah, and I think they pulled out a couple of projects from Sutton or some other projects that were kind of major projects, and they're either pushing them out further or putting them onto the deferred list. Nothing from our region has been touched as far as I know.
Yes, Brad.
STIP Amendment number 5 could be fairly radically impacted by an extension that has to happen by the end of March. And if they level fund FY12, which is possible, I don't know what impacts that will have.
Wait, FY12? We're in FY12.
I know.
Yeah.
This is for FY12.
Oh.
And
Federal level?
yeah, the federal level. And I know the Senate version, the map 21, actually had, for us, some pretty significant increases in funding. So that has yet to play out, and I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But that is FY12 funding. So it's map 21's a 2-year bill, but we're 6 months into the 2 years. So some of this, we won't have anything for you potentially until they make a movement.
What is MAP 21?
I don't
It's
know.
moving ahead for progress in the 21st century. I
Okay,
think.
that's the name of the bill on the
Yeah.
federal level?
Yeah, on the
It's one
Senate.
it's one of the bills. There's
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll definitely touch base with people in DOT and the planning department to see if they've thought about that yet, and what the implications might be, how the amendment might change if this bill somehow gets approved or the continuing resolution includes those funding levels at current levels.
Any other questions about the TIP? What else you got, Mike?
I just wanted to comment that Michelle has been working on a travel plan for Safe Routes to School in Wakefield. This is to help them get safe routes to school funding as opposed to transportation enhancements funding that they had awarded a few years ago. They decided not to use that funding to fund some sidewalks, and so this is the first step in getting them safe routes to school funding. The plan is looking great. It's almost done, and it happened pretty quickly. So it was a good process, and we'll be able to show that probably next policy meeting or the meeting after that.
Okay, any questions about that? If not, Dan?
Very quickly, you might have seen there was a handout about traffic counts from DOT issued. We've received our listing from DOT. Not every community has counts scheduled for this year, but as always, you can request traffic counts. So feel free to shoot me an email or call me if anybody needs any traffic counts done.
That's it? All right. Does anybody else have anything under project updates? If not, let's move on to item number 7. Is there any other business folks would like to bring before the MPO?
I have
Yeah.
a question. When do you think it's likely we'll know whether they're going to widen the span on Sarah Milton Long?
There's a,
I know I realize it's a larger, that's why I said, you see that happening in 6 months, a year from now, that the decision is made.
right now, we're working with the
Maine?
Department of Maine. Maine DOT is responsible for spearheading the effort at Sarah Long, and we are working with them. And right now, the big issue is expanding the piers to get the new generation of ships up there.
Exactly.
So we are working with them, and they are doing additional studies to see what the costs are and what options we have. So can I tell you? No. I mean, but there's additional studies and research going into it. So it's anyone's guess, but it's a little bit of time out there.
Okay. Any other questions?
I said one thing
Yes,
I want to
please.
echo. I really appreciate Dan and your comments earlier. When we do projects, I think helpful with DOT and the public is when we do like the ITS updates or the asset management or the human services, that when you do a project like this, defining what the purpose is, what the goal of doing this is, and then having measures to say, did we meet our goal? Some way of saying, here's our goal, and a way of, when we have a goal, is come up with a measure and say, yeah, are we getting out what to do? Otherwise, we do a project and, you know, if you don't know where you're going, any direction will get you there. So I think that's, I heard it echoed a couple of times today, and I think that would help explain to the people in the group here why are we doing this, what our goals are, and is it effective? And the other piece is, when we have this, is...
Let me just ask you a question about that. That's all well and good, but how does the component of unintended consequences get into that report? When you go back and look at your goals,
Yeah.
you go back and say, well, we met our goals, but over here, there are a whole bunch of unintended consequences. Do those get into the report as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's a little bit...
That's the problem.
That's a little different issue. These are concern, you know, I know where you're going with this, with the cameras, but, yeah, and there's, I mean, everything we do, I know I work in, you know, we did the aerial imaging, it was a big concern. I worked a lot with Homeland Security because they were very concerned that we were going to publish 6-inch imagery. You know, and accuracy on the ground is plus or minus 2 feet. That's pretty accurate data. We're showing shipyards, and we're showing nuclear power plants, and we're showing bridge locations. And what it comes down to is, what's the balance between the good versus the harm that can come from it? And when is a project has more benefit to the public than there is potential harm? And that is a balance. And again, I think Brad said there's laws put in place to maybe protect ourselves, and that should be considered. But that's a different issue, I guess. What really I'm looking at, what is the goal of this project? Why are we doing it? What we hope to accomplish from it? How do we measure it to see if we made our accomplishments?
You could make your goal and still have a ton of unintended consequences that might not make the report. That's my problem.
Absolutely. That's part of the
Yeah.
project, and those are things that need to come up during the scoping of
Yeah.
these projects. And those are a legitimate thing to say. You know, here's concerns, or here's how we address those concerns. But it's good to get those out and identified right up front, and figure out ways how we can mitigate that.
Well,
And I think another...
that would be a good thing to do,
Yeah.
except that sometimes you don't understand, the general public or other interested parties don't understand exactly what the equipment can do, what the guidelines are and how it can be used, who has access to the data that's collected. You know, the general public or interested parties don't know that. You know the goal of what you're doing, but
I fully agree,
Yeah.
right, and I think Dan's kind of comment is that we have public hearings and meetings to talk about this stuff, and people don't show up. That we need to encourage more participation, people that understand these things, and let's get these issues out in the forefront, and let's try to address them. So.
And I think another challenge is when something's identified, if it needs to be dealt with legislatively, technology changes so fast that by the time we enact some legislation that deals with one thing, all of a sudden there's new technology. So that's another sort of implementation
component of that,
challenge.
right.
Hang on, Ben.
Oh, just the last one was, I think doing this too, like Dan said, is really helpful. If, you know, DOT can't communicate all these things out to everybody, and we really count on these regional planning commissions and the tax and the policy, you folks here, to get this information back to your towns and get it out there. Because, then if we need decisions made, legislation changed, you need to get to your representatives. And I know a lot of people think that DOT has a direct line to representatives, but we actually work for them, and they tell us what to do. We really don't get enough. Well, we try to tell them what we think, but we're not always that effective. But really, the true effectiveness comes from the ground up, the grassroots, from the citizens going to the representatives and the senators. But you folks getting this information from here to the town, to town officials and down to your citizens, that's where it would be effective. And so that's a great point. Really, this information has to flow down and then flow back up to the people.
Thank you.
I was just gonna, a general comment about ITS. They're not all the solutions. I don't think the ITS ideas have that negative potential either. There's some things like the ABL systems for transit, which perhaps there's, some
Yeah,
things
but
that
it's the
they can be
insidious
used.
little things you don't see.
Yeah.
I mean, the sign on the bridge hanging off there, wet roads ahead, a traffic accident 2 miles ahead, divert on exit 6, that's all great.
Mm-hmm.
It's those other little things that just snuck in the agenda and in the budget that nobody mentioned.
I definitely understand that, and I think for the regional ITS, I think more of the focus is going to be on those things like signal coordination, or having that ability to count cars when they're going through the signal, so that you can have in the future a real-time signal update instead of having inefficiencies within your signals. Get them all working so that they're smart signals, and you're not wasting time 10 o'clock at night with somebody sitting at a red light. So
We sometimes forget the Constitution, however, when we're
Yeah.
doing that.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions before we adjourn? Yes. Oh,
Appreciate it if everybody take a look at what's up on there. If you are interested, I'm going to bring it up again at the next meeting and see whether we can sponsor this. Obviously, my background is emergency management. This is a course that's been it's a 2-hour course. We could put it on locally. That could be sponsored here through this organization or any city. I would say every elected councilor, every elected selectman. It's only a 2-hour. It's the first course of this nation. When you see a G in front of a course, ordinarily that's got to be taught by FEMA. That's been so successful, they're letting us teach it locally. Won't ask you now. You can EMI space G402. I am going to poll everybody the next couple of meetings, and if there's enough interest, we'll try and get it put on. Believe me, it's worth it. I have to go through about 20 or 40 hours to get what you can get out of that 2-hour course.
if you can make some of this written material available for the next packet, that way people will be able to take a look at it before we actually have our meeting, that would be great.
I'll make sure we
Yeah,
get that.
we can work that.
Anything else? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Thank
Second.
you. Okay, move to second. That was quick. Any objections? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you all.